Good morning. This is a practice for I, Penny Lee Deer, teaching assistant for the Clemente Veterans Initiative Fall 2022. My reflections about the class. I think the history of Athena, Greek goddess of the art of war, and the insignia of the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, WAAC, established in 1941. Also, by 1943, we became active duty component, Women's Army Corps, 1943 to 1978. Also, you will see the importance that I feel music played in American history to include my time in the service from 1975 to 1995 in the Women's Army Corps. The value of learning and relearning our American history through the arts by weaving music, art, literature into the fabric of America is invaluable. Now, I have written a piece called A Piece of Living History. Basic training was the start to a brand new way of life, more than a career. I became something bigger than just me. I was one of them. I, Penny Lee Madden, was the member of the Women's Army Corps. I am very proud to be a WAC, and I consider myself part of living history, as you will find out as you follow my journey. Little did I know what the Women's Army Corps would look like in 1975. Our basic training would be at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, which is a new concept for the WACs. The Women's Army Corps had been headquarters at Fort McClellan, Alabama since 1943, but that base was shut down because it's a toxic dump. We all fell in dress right dress from all different walks of life. We learned together about the terms we will need to make it through the next weeks in basic training. The unit is broken down in segments. We were known as Charlie 17-5. I was an Alpha platoon of Charlie Company of the 17th Battalion and the 5th Brigade. We further broke down into squads and even sections within our squad. Each member of this cherry unit knew her place. We were called by our last names. They tried to tear us down from what we once were, a naive country girl looking for something different, only to rebuild us into the best of the Women's Army Corps, someone with pride, endurance, confidence, respect, and grit. One of my fond memories at the reception station was music. I recall specifically the hustle. Turns out white girls can dance. Where I hailed from, we would call that line dancing. Just another one of our many dances we learned at the local jamboree, along with the jitterbug, the two-step, a waltz, and even square dancing. Oh, Ma, I want to go, but they won't let me go. We were one of the first platoons to have the first and only male drill sergeant in the brigade, since our unit was all female. There were no co-ed basic training options. We were completely segregated, male and females trained separately. This obviously was a new concept for us as well as our drill instructor. He didn't know what to do with us, how to treat us. He'd only worked with male recruits before. If you did a good job on our inspections, he would address us as sweet peas. But if our efforts were less than stellar, we would hear, hamburger heads, get down and give me 20 female push-ups, that is, which means that you actually only were on your knees and extended your arms up and down. We would march and sing when they tried to make a whack out of me. Some of the classes that were taught were really surprised to me on how to apply makeup properly, personal hygiene, professional etiquette. Most of the women serving during this time frame were traditionally nurses and administrative personnel. We were treated like young ladies and we were expected to act accordingly. These were high standards. We qualified in the M16, Claymore Mines, went to the gas chamber, went on bivouac, like our counterparts, despite being ladies. Another Jody call went something like this. They threw away my halter tops and made me wear bobby socks. We would march to the parade field where we would conduct physical exercise. Our uniform for physical training was an ironed blouse tucked in with a wraparound skirt and a pair of shorts underneath the skirt with bobby socks and sneakers. As we prepared for training, we were given commands such as extend to the left, march, at double interval, dress right, dress. It was not until we were in our appropriate locations and ready to commence our exercises that we would disrobe. By unwrapping the skirt, placing it to the right of us folded. There it would remain until the exercise routine was complete. Then we would again wrap our skirt around ourselves to be completely covered up, ready to return marching to the barracks. Another cadence was, they took away my boyfriend and they made me sleep alone. I found it very curious, these words. We were ladies, and because we were recruits in the Women's Army Corps, we were not allowed to be married, and we were not allowed to have children. If you happen to have children, you would need to give up your custody to someone else until your service was done in the Women's Army Corps. This is no longer the case in an integrated army. It would take another 3 years to establish and integrate into the United States Army. The Women's Army Corps was disbanded in 1978. We were now equals in all aspects. The WAC guidon was encased and retired. Members of the Women's Army Corps were all required to update their contracts if they were electing to stay in service, or they had the option to be honorably discharged. From then on, we marched to the beat of a new drum. The changes were many, up, 2, 3, 4, as we made our way towards retirement in the United States Army as real soldiers. Basic training has changed dramatically since the early 1970s. Looking back, I realize what it took to step out of my comfort zone. I come from upstate New York, very country, secluded. We're basically a bunch of white people trying to hoe out a living. Farmers, that is. I had no idea that the Army would help me become part of a more complex, diverse culture. When I joined the Women's Army Corps, there was only 13,000 of us, making up 7% of the Army. We are currently about 13% strong in the armed forces and still marginally recognized. But I was once told that I was worth a pound of salt it took to plant me. I choose to believe these words. I knew when I left my childhood home that I would be gone for 20 years and that I would be retired at age 39. And that's what I did. The Army would mold me into the lean fighting machine we hear of. I was a force to be recognized. Maybe I still am. I do need to be mindful that I'm no longer in the service. After all, my drill sergeant mentality shows up periodically as I take somebody's head off. As I stand here and ponder, I wonder if I might have had some grip prior to joining the Women's Army Corps. What do you think? Thank you.